Money, money, money seems to make the world go round. And the church is not exempt from this either. It's hard to find a church these days that isn't asking for more money for some project or other. And it's probably one of the biggest reasons non-Christians are turned off church. Many churches say their appeals are for regular members only, but people still switch off. Some walk away, and honestly, who can blame them? If joining a church feels like signing up to a financial scheme, the message becomes painfully simple. Join us and we'll have your money. But let me tell you something clearly, simply and biblically. God does not need your money, nor does he want your money. When I was a new Christian, I had what I thought was a brilliant idea. Market stalls run by unemployed Christians who, after training, would eventually own them and build small businesses for themselves. I poured everything into it. One stall to start with, enough income to cover costs, but never enough to grow or pay a wage. One day, after taking just enough money to cover the stall fees, a storm blew up out of nowhere. Thunder, lightning, torrential rain. I had the stall tied to the van. And sitting on a stool, I cried out, "Lord, don't you see I could do so much good for you if there was just a bit more money?" Then out of the storm God spoke, like thunder, with such force it nearly knocked me off my stool. "I don't want your money." That moment changed me. Money is not your route to a meaningful relationship with God. This isn't about not giving, it's about balance. If you're accessing the facilities of a church, of course they need to be paid for, and it stands to reason that you contribute. But how much is between you and God and no one else? The problem is the sheer volume of appeals today. Carefully crafted messages using, quite often, manipulative, coercive, emotive psychology. Quite often also leaning on misinterpreted and out of context scripture. Let's be sensible for a moment though. If someone says they need X amount for a project, ask yourself this question. What can I personally do with the amount I'm about to give? Large charities, including Christian organisations and churches, have huge overheads. Much of your hard-earned, God-given money goes on wages, pensions, and, of course, administration. Check their annual financial statements and you may be quite shocked. And you might be surprised how much you could achieve through your own efforts. Yes, of course, it requires hard work and the wise use of resources, but the results can far exceed what larger organisations produce proportionately. I know this from more than 20 years of ministry. Thousands of decisions for Christ, extraordinary healings, orphanages refurbished, safe water wells in tribal villages, churches planted, evangelistic outreaches, conferences for church leaders, and not once did I ask anyone for a penny. Not once was freely given money spent on personal expenses or admin. Now, I'm not saying don't support projects. All I'm saying is just ask God, should I give this? Or is there something I can do myself that will bear more fruit in proportion? You don't need anyone's permission to do this. You're simply obeying God. The New Testament teaches cheerful, willing, spirit-led generosity, not legal requirements. It tells us to give freely, give joyfully, give as we are able, and give from the heart, not from pressure-driven fear or manipulation. Because God isn't after your wallet. He's after your heart-given trust. Money, of course, is mentioned in Scripture. Not because God needs it. Of course, he doesn't. He created oceans, stars, galaxies. He's not short of cash. But he knows we cling to money like it's oxygen. We treat it as identity, security, protection, self-worth. Some churches even treat giving like a bribe. If I give this amount, God is obliged to give X amount back. One church I visited not so long ago said during the offering, you know the principle. Put one car in and you'll get 3 back. I wondered how many cars were sitting on his driveway. Ridiculous, of course it is. When God talks about giving, he's not trying to take something from you. He's trying to free you from the thing that could enslave you. Money is a servant, never should be your master. Never a fear, never a chain around you, never a voice telling you you're not good enough unless you give more. Scripture, of course, itself is often misused. You know the story, God feeds the birds and clothes the flowers. Yeah, Jesus said this to calm anxiety, not to raise money. And when used in giving sermons, it becomes emotional leverage. It's talking about God's generosity, not yours. That reversal of meaning is psychological manipulation, dressed up as trust. The story of the widow with the 2 coins, often used to encourage sacrificial giving. But in context, the story is actually about hypocrisy and exploitation, not how much you should give. God isn't looking at how much you give. He's looking at your heart. If you've ever felt pressured, shamed, or manipulated about money in a religious setting, that certainly was not God. It was more than likely the use of emotive psychological tactics, human methods designed to stir fear, guilt, or obligation. Beware statements like X amount of pounds has been pledged and we're just a few givers away. Could you be one of them? Now, that sounds relatively harmless, even perhaps inspirational, but they're built on classic pressure tactics, social proof, urgency, belonging, pressure, goal-driven obligation. This frames giving as a target to hit, not a joyful choice. It's fundraising psychology wrapped in spiritual language. Whenever giving is tied to momentum, goals, or subtle challenges, it stops being an invitation and becomes manipulation dressed up as devotion. And then, of course, there's the issue to do with tithing. The modern idea of tithing, the pressure to give 10%, is not something God demands. The Old Testament tithe was part of Israel's national system. It was about land crops, livestock, temple maintenance, caring for the poor. It wasn't a church tax. It wasn't a salvation fee. It wasn't a measure of holiness. It was simply a practical means of community survival. Many churches, of course, do admit this, but then strangely and bizarrely, I feel, the leader tends to add, of course, I've always used 10% as a good guide for my giving. Well, that may be true personally for them, but publicly, it's a subtle nudge, a way of locking people into tithing through the back door. Jesus never commanded Christians to tithe. The early church didn't preach tithing. Paul didn't teach tithing. Not once did he say, you must give 10%. Every New Testament mention of tithing is either addressing Pharisees under the law, describing old covenant practices, or quoting someone bragging about their giving. Not one verse commands Christians to give a mandatory 10%. God does not require the modern tithe. And God does not demand your 10%. God doesn't threaten you over money. Some people, of course, say giving is worship. Well, that's sometimes true, but often misused. Giving can be worship, but only when it flows from a sincere heart. Most often, though, the phrase is used manipulatively to create emotional pressure, make people feel unspiritual if they don't give, make giving a test of your devotion, and sanctify the offering so people feel obligated. God invites your heart. He invites your trust. He invites your freedom. And when he has your heart, generosity becomes natural, not a burden, not a performance, and certainly not a rule. So the next time someone says the church always wants your money, you can say, well, perhaps in some cases, but God doesn't. He wants your sincere heart-given trust. And that is worth more than anything you could ever put in a basket. Be guided by him and not led by the nose by others.